Greetings from Mesa United Methodist Church of Albuquerque, New Mexico. We hope this message will be meaningful and relevant to your life and your relationship with God. We invite you to join us for worship on Sunday mornings. Our traditional service is at 8:30 a.m. and at 11 a.m. we gather for contemporary worship. More information may be found at our website, mesaviewumc.com. Now may you be blessed through the reading and hearing of God's holy word.
Our gospel reading this morning comes from the Gospel of Matthew, the 14th chapter, beginning with the 22nd verse. Immediately, Jesus made the disciples get into the boat and go on ahead to the other side while he dismissed the crowds. And after he had dismissed the crowds, he went up the mountain by himself to pray. And when evening came, he was there alone, but by this time the boat, battered by the waves, was far from the land, for the wind was against them. And early in the morning he came walking toward them on the sea. But when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were terrified, saying, "It is a ghost." And they cried out in fear. But immediately Jesus spoke to them and said, "Take heart, it is I, do not be afraid." Peter answered him, "Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water." And he said, "Come." So Peter got out of the boat, started walking on the water, and came toward Jesus. But when he noticed the strong wind, he became frightened, and beginning to sink, he cried out, "Lord, save me." Jesus immediately reached out his hand and caught him, saying to him, "You of little faith, why did you doubt?" And when they got into the boat, the wind ceased, and those in the boat worshipped him, saying, "Truly, you are the Son of God." And when they had crossed over, they came to land at Gennesaret. Our second reading comes to us from the 13th chapter of Numbers, starting with verse 1. And the Lord said to Moses, "Send men to spy out the land of Canaan, which I am giving to the Israelites. From each of their ancestral tribes you shall send a man, every one a leader among them." And Moses sent them to spy out the land of Canaan. And he said to them, "Go up there to the Negev, and go up into the hill country, and see what the land is like, and whether the people who live in it are strong or weak, whether they are few or many, and whether the land they live in is good or bad, and whether the towns that they live in are unwalled or fortified, and whether the land is rich or poor, and whether there are trees in it or not. Be bold and bring some of the fruit of the land." Now it was the season of the first ripe grapes. So they went up and they spied out the land. At the end of 40 days, they returned from spying out the land. And they came to Moses and Aaron and to all the congregation of the Israelites in the wilderness of Paran at Kadesh. And they brought back word to them and to all the congregation and showed them the fruit of the land. And they told him, "We came to the land to which you sent us. It flows with milk and honey, and this is its fruit. Yet the people who live in the land are strong, and the towns are fortified and very large. And besides, we saw the descendants of Anak there." But Caleb quieted the people before Moses, and he said, "Let us go up at once and occupy it, for we are well able to overcome it." And then the men who had gone up with him said, "We're not able to go up against these people, for they are stronger than we." So they brought to the Israelites an unfavorable report of the land that they had spied out, saying, "The land that we have gone through as spies is a land that devours its inhabitants, and all the people that we saw in it are of great size. And there we saw the Nephilim, the Anakites came from the Nephilim, and to ourselves we seemed like grasshoppers, and so we seemed to them." This is the word of God for the people of God.
Thanks be to God. So if you have not already been using your blue scripture insert, I invite you to take it out. On the back is a place to write things to remember from today's service and make use of that during today's message. And I want to start with a story this morning. At our prayer breakfast in May, rather than sitting in one of the classrooms and talking and learning and praying for the church, we decided that we were going to go out onto the property, and those who were able were going to walk circles. 7 circles around the property was our goal, praying big Holy Spirit-filled prayers for some of the needs of the church. And not everybody made all of the laps, and the circles got a little bit smaller the more times we went around. But one of the prayers that we were praying for was for the elimination of the mortgage debt that's held by this church. That was on Saturday. On Tuesday, I received a call from Reverend Randall Parton, who's the provost for the conference, which means basically he's the assistant to the bishop, and he runs the conference office and the conference staff. And he had been involved with us in some conversations we had been having over several years about what we might do with the property to the east of us. We talked starting with maybe an adult daycare facility or senior housing or an intentional community. Lots of different ideas have been thrown around, and so he wanted to know if we were still interested in doing something with that piece of the property. Would we be interested in talking with another Methodist organization about them using that piece of the property? And I said we would certainly be open to that conversation. So remember, Saturday we're praying for the elimination of debt. On Tuesday, I get this call. And so I met with Saranam, which is a group that's affiliated here with Central United Methodist Church. They began 15 years ago, when Central received a little over $3 million in a bequest from somebody's will. So just remember, you too can include Mesa View in your estate planning. And one of the things we're working on is setting up an endowment committee and policies and procedures, what would happen if we received planned giving monies and how those would be used for the church. So you can look for more information coming on that. But I met with Saranam, and they're a residential 2-year residential program for homeless families here in Albuquerque. And we had a very good conversation that led to some of their board members coming out and meeting with some of the leaders from Mesa View. And this last Tuesday night, Wednesday night, the trustees approved us moving forward in conversations with Saranam. Before I give some more information on that, I want to show a very sort of edited video from Saranam so you learn a little bit more about who.
Saranam is a 2-year housing and education program where we provide everything a family needs to live for free for 2 years while they work on their education and skill building so they can support themselves when they leave our program. We are unique because we don't provide those emergency services and short-term solutions. We provide long-term opportunities for permanent change for families. Once families begin their journey at Saranam, they start the hard work of going to school and increasing their education so they can increase their employment opportunities, which ultimately will provide stability for their family and sustainability in life. The impact we have on our families is really great. We don't just give a little bit and expect a little bit. We give a lot, but we expect a lot in return. Our families have to be very responsible, committed, motivated, and dedicated to the process of change that they have to go through and that transformation that happens over their 2 years with us. It truly is a journey. One of the most amazing days at Saranam is when we open the door for a family into their home the first time, because they know this is not an emergency shelter. This is their home, and everything in it is theirs from day one. They get to take that with them when they leave our program.
They have to be ready to really work hard, not only as an individual parent or individual parents, but also as a family. We have like a 70-something% success rate for people completing the goals that they set for themselves when they came into the program, and I think that's pretty awesome.
The tools and resources that Saranam provides each family, housing, education, and community, enables them to continue their journey when they leave our program. This has an impact not only for this generation, but for generations to come.
So a couple of points. First is that Saranam means refuge. There's actually a song in the hymnal called Saranam, Saranam. The second point is that we are only in conversation at this place. We have not made any agreements. We've not signed any documents. We have not agreed on any terms, so don't anybody get upset that you've been missing out on information. This is just conversation. We are doing some due diligence on our side, but we're also waiting for their board to do their due diligence and meet to formally approve moving forward in conversation with us as a possibility. So I think we're still a couple of months away from their board making that decision, even farther away from making a potential deal with them. If we do move forward in conversation, they will come and make a further presentation about who they are and what we do, not just for you, but also for our neighbors, so they're aware of what's going on. We'll hold listening sessions and get everybody sort of involved so we're all on the same page as we move forward with this. So this is right now just to make you aware of what's going on, about the possibility of either leasing or maybe selling the property to the east to them to be able to use. And I hope that many of you, most of you, all of you are as excited about this possibility as I am, as the trustees are, as some of the other key leadership of the church, because not only will this help us with our mission and serving a need that we know is in our community, but it will also greatly help us financially. Right now, our mortgage balance is currently about $837,000. We make payments of $6,045 a month on our mortgage. So that's pretty easy math. That's $72,000 a year that goes out of our budget to pay our mortgage. That makes our financial reality very difficult. Imagine what we could do with an extra $72,000 a year. How many ministries could we finance and things we could take on with that money? And as we saw last fall, it doesn't take much to put our financial picture into very unsound positions. And you stepping forward and taking a leap of faith with us last fall when our preschool numbers were not up to what we expected them to be was one of the great accomplishments of this church in the past year. But finance has been looking very hard at how do we deal with this reality. And in the weeks leading up to the prayer group, lifting up, eliminating our debt as one of our prayers, they had set out some strategic goals for the coming year, and one of them was to eliminate that debt by December 31st, 2020. When the date was first given to me, I said this in my charge conference documents, and I'll admit I had a knot in the pit of my stomach. I said, there's no way we can do that. That's too soon. How do we begin to accomplish? That's a giant that's too big for us to tackle. We can't even go into that line. And then I realized that's probably exactly the right response that we needed, is that we can't do that because that means that God has to be involved in that plan. And I think that's where we are. I think that's what we're seeing, is that God is helping us out, because eliminating most or all of our mortgage would open up huge new possibilities for who we are and what we can be doing in our community. So please begin to pray to God for God's guidance and God's leadership as we move forward, and we'll keep you up to date as we move forward. But I want to talk about some of the other things that we've accomplished in this past year. First, we accomplished one of our strategic goals, which was becoming a reconciling congregation. The first one in New Mexico Annual Conference, the 900th reconciling group in the denomination in the country. And this was not without consequence. We did lose some attendees and some members of the congregation because of that decision, although we also gained some as well. And we received a rather scathing letter from the cabinet about that decision, and we responded with our process and simply said, we believe that God has called us to love everybody. And that's what we believe we're stating by becoming a reconciling congregation, and that's where we are. This month, we will celebrate the 1-year anniversary of hosting a memory cafe, which is a space and a time for people with Alzheimer's and dementia and their families and caretakers to come and have fellowship and time to be with others who are going through exactly the same thing that they are. So they're not isolated. And they know that they're not alone in this process. And while there are memory cafes that are worldwide, there are only 2 in Albuquerque. Both of them hosted by United Methodist churches, and we're the only one on the west side who are doing that. We also continue to host our Parents' Night, which has more than 30 kids from the community, none of them from our congregation, who come to allow their parents to have a night out by themselves. Many of these kids are special needs children because the people that we're staffing it with have training in how to deal with special needs children. And otherwise, these parents wouldn't be able to have time because finding a babysitter who knows what to do and who's willing to do it at a reasonable price is nearly impossible for special needs kids and special needs families. So this is a way that we are indeed making a difference. Our youth group continues to be made up. Nearly half of the participants are from outside the congregation. They're not attending worship here. They're not attending worship anywhere else. This is how they are coming to know of God's love, and you are making that possible. The youth group does lots of different things. One of the things they're participating in is making lunches for Habitat for Humanity, which many of you are participating in as well. We collected thousands of pounds of food in the past year, which we're giving out to several different food pantries and homeless ministries. Cindy Kaiser told me a story this week that when we collected cereals that one month, that she said when she could give a whole box of cereal to some of the homeless people who attend the program she runs at Central, so the smiles on their face when they received that were just overwhelming. You're making that possible. We very conservatively estimated we rescued 40,000 cartons of milk, along with thousands of other items from just 2 elementary schools this past school year that otherwise would have been thrown away. We gave to 3 food pantries and 2 homeless ministries. And we are in need of some other people to help us with that. So if you have a couple of hours on a weekday morning for once a week, or even just to be able to fill in as a sub as people are needed, please speak with me or Cindy Kaiser, who's sitting in that second to last row there. We give away 40 to 60 prayer blankets and prayer shawls every single month to people, most of whom are going through times of crisis and need to know that they are not alone. Amy Levan and Karen Sargent are doing yeoman's work. They're carrying the water for us on that, so please thank them. But it's going to people we know, people you know, also to residents of the Ronald McDonald House and to Presbyterian and UNMH hospitals. You make that possible. That is how we are making a difference in the world. We installed shade structures on our playground and had the parking lots resealed and painted, as well as doing some other landscaping work on the property. We have 4 laity who are working on either continuing or becoming certified lay servants. Some of them will move on to becoming certified lay ministers. Jim Ogier came out to consult with us a year ago to talk about the possibility of creating a satellite location in Montana Ranch, to the west of us. And we are working hard towards that with a possible opening date of that location in December of 2019. That's not very far away. And that's just a portion of the things that we are doing. Not even touch. We could spend another hour talking about all the things that we are doing in this church and in this community. If you weren't here last week, you didn't get a charge conference document, so you did not look through those, please read those reports from our committees and teams about some of the ways that we are making a difference. I can tell you, in meeting with other clergy, hearing from what the DSs are saying, we're a church that worships a little under 100 every single week, and we are doing more than churches even twice our size are even beginning to do in their congregations. You should be proud of who you are and what we do, because what we do furthers the kingdom of God. So a couple of cautionary notes. As already stated, our finances continue to be a major concern for us, but the celebration of that is your faithfulness and of God's faithfulness to us. There were a couple of times this summer, looking at forecasting ahead a couple of weeks, Don would come to me and say, I'm not sure how we're going to make payroll. But you know what? We made payroll. And we paid, except for some payments we owe to the annual conference, all our bills are paid. And this is not unique to us. And if you've been here for a while, you know this is not unique. This has always been a struggle. But there are some very large churches that are struggling financially as well. The other concern is we reported 3 fewer attendees in worship last year than we did the year before. And worship continues to sort of lag a little bit this year as well. But if you were here a couple of weeks ago when there were 70 in here for the 8:30 service, you remember how exciting that was, how much energy there was in the room? That's a lot funner than worshiping at 45. That means that you being here is important, not for numbers' sake, but because when you're not in worship, it means that we're missing a part of the body of Christ. That's who we are, as one body. And second is, if you love it here, tell other people about what it is that we're doing. Invite them to come, not just to worship, but to lots of other things. There are some people who will never step foot in worship who will be affiliated with the church because of how we're making a difference in people's lives. So tell them the things that we're doing, not just once, but over and over again. And that sort of leads us into where we're going and new things that are happening or we might see happening. One of the things that nearly every church that I attended in June talked about was, or emphasized, with their small group ministries and opportunities. And that's one of our strategic goals, is to have everyone engaged in a small church ministry in one way or another, but it's not yet gone anywhere. And let me say, this is more than just about dinner groups or about faith Christian formation classes. Those are small group activities as well. One of the churches we went to had a small group that was forming. They had somebody who was an obedience trainer for dogs, and so they were forming a small group around working with people and their dogs. Another one was forming a small group around a walking ministry. There's lots of ways that we can do this, but we need a group to coordinate these activities. It doesn't have to be just one of you. There can be several who say, we're going to take this on and work on this together. I met with the young adults of the church a couple of weeks ago. We talked about what is it that they need. And so we're working on forming a young adults ministry. And one of the things, they also asked for some specific classes for where they are in their life at the moment. So we'll be working on those. But one of the other things that some of them asked for was that they said that we'd be interested in setting up a mentor relationship. Talking with or having somebody who is older than they are, who's not their parents, that they can have an honest conversation about what's going on in their life and just getting some feedback. What would you do? Where you are now, how would you relate to where I am? Or just having somebody that they can just talk to. So we'll be working on that, and if you're interested in participating in that, you can speak with me or just look for more information coming up. John and Violet Foley made it a special gift to the church to be used for outreach activities, and we've been talking about different possibilities for the use of those funds. But one of the ones we talked about was funding a lecture series titled something like Views from the Mesa, something like that, in which we bring in experts or people working in different fields that relate to the church or the community or the needs of the world to let us know, what's happening in this and how can we be involved in making a difference on whatever that is. And so we'll begin working on those. I've already talked about some of the potential ways to make worship better. We've sort of seen some of them come into place, and we're beginning to put together a new group that Beth Rose will be heading up to sort of oversee our worship activities. The first meeting of that will be at the end of this month, so if you would like to participate, look for the newsletter and the bulletin for more information. But a couple of other things peripherally to what we do here on Sunday is I'd like to start probably a quarterly healing service. This is not where people come up and they lay hand and go, "You're healed!" and they jump out of their wheelchairs. That's not what I'm talking about. Simply giving a space for people to name what's going on in their lives. And yes, we can lay hands on them and we can pray for them. And remember that healing doesn't necessarily come with a cure. Right? That we often confuse those two things, that you can be healed and still have whatever it is that you're struggling with. And I also think that we need to start talking about potential of a worship service for people who are dealing with addiction. Having a special time for those who are struggling with that illness to be able to hear God's word in their life. I'd like to increase the use of our video in worship. You're beginning to see some of that. So some of it's just being more aware of all the things that are going on, so you can see pictures of when Cindy gives boxes of cereal to homeless people, or when Amy goes to Ronald McDonald House, or when we take lunches to Habitat for Humanity, or whatever it might be, that you can see how our ministries are being impacting in the world, but also to give a space for you to talk about your own stories of faith and how Mesa View has made a difference in your life. We need to greatly increase our use of social media. but doing so in a way that tells our story that's, true to who we are. That includes a redesign of our websites. And I like to put together a time, perhaps monthly, in which we come together and we just dream God's dreams. Just lifting things up. And it could be small things. Say, we really need signage to point out where the restrooms are. But it could be bigger things that we can't even begin to imagine what God might be calling us to do right now. To talk about the possibilities and potentialities for the congregation. So, for example, this wall that outside, I see it every day when I'm coming into church, and it needs some work on it, but I always think, what would that look like with a mural on it? Something that makes it look different and better. Maybe we partner with one of the elementary schools or with the city's summer art program to help them to paint that mural. And this thing out here, just remember, this is not actually a pond. It's not a natural thing. It's not a wetland. It was dug as a water catchment system. And we can catch the water from the property in lots of ways. One of the ideas that's been bantied about is to buy huge tanks to put under the ground there, and then we irrigate the grass out of the water we're catching rather than paying the city on their water bill. But right now it's sort of, has a little bit of an amphitheater shape. So what if we regrade that and we put a stage down there? And not only can we now worship out there, but now we can hold concerts out on the corner. We can hold theater performances out on the corner. And maybe there's a prayer garden out there, a columbarium, other things that make it a draw for the community to come in. They say, even more, this is a place where we're interacting with those around us or making our community better. Some big Holy Spirit-filled dreams. One of my dreams is still to have a playground that's truly handicap accessible for children. So children in wheelchairs can, come and get onto all the equipments and be able to participate just like every other child. And that's on top of the other goals that we have and the other things we're talking about and the dreams that you might have that we haven't even heard yet. Because God doesn't call for small dreams. God doesn't call for small visions or small wishes. God calls for us to dream big and to pray big. Which is why I chose those passages from Matthew and Numbers for this morning. Because when Peter decides to get out of the boat, notice none of the other disciples do that. Some of that is just unique to who Peter is.
Yeah.
But Peter takes an enormous step of faith to even believe that he can walk on the water. But he's willing to step out of the boat. That's a huge jump of faith. And even though Jesus will in a few verses accuse him of being faithless or a doubter, it's not because he begins to sink. That's not when Jesus rebukes him. When does Jesus rebuke him? After he calls out, "Save me." As if to say that Peter doesn't believe that Jesus would do that Jesus would let him sink. So his failure of faith is not stepping out of the boat. His failure of faith is not even sinking when the waves rise up on him. His failure of faith is saying, "God, save me," not trusting that God would be there to pull him back up. And the same thing happens with the Israelites. Is that they're sitting on the edge of the promised land. They've escaped slavery in Egypt. And God says to Moses, "Send spies into the land, see what it looks like. The land that I've promised to you. The land I'm going to give to you." That means the hard work is already done. He's just saying, go check and see what it looks like. So you can get really excited and come back and tell everybody how great this is and let's go. And so Moses sends 12 men and they scope out the land. And after 40 days, they come back and what do they say? Or at least what do 10 of them say? "Man, those people are big. There's giants in the land. We're like grasshoppers to them. And their cities are fortified, and they're vicious, and they're tough. There's no way we can overcome that." But Caleb and Joshua said, "We have God on our side. He's already promised us this land. How can we lose? Who cares if there's giants over there? With God, all things are possible." So stop being faithless and live into the dream that God has given to you. But the 10 overcome Joshua and Caleb, and so they spend 40 years in the wilderness because they can't cross over because they haven't been faithful to God. The same is true for us. Some of the things that we're talking about doing, they're giants. Eliminating $837,000 of debt in 2 years, why would you even begin to think that you could do that? You can't conquer that. Not in that amount of time. We worship 100 people. Why would we ever think that we could open another location? Only big churches open satellite locations. That's impossible. Why would you even think of doing that? Those giants are too big for us. Let's just stay right where we are. You know, the land looks pretty good on this side too. Sure, they have flowing milk and honey. Imagine that. But you know, we're doing okay. But God calls for us to move beyond our fears, to move beyond our comfort zones, because it's outside of our comfort zones that God makes miracles happen. It's outside of our comfort zones where we conquer giants. And so God says, I have these dreams and I have these visions. I have promises for you. Are you ready to buy in? Are you ready to cross that river into the land of giants and conquer? Because our future doesn't lie in the past. Our future is in front of us. So let us fear not. But let us begin to see God's dreams, or to see God's visions and to dream God's dreams. To move beyond our areas of comfort, to do God's work so that next year may indeed be the best year that Mesa View has ever had. I pray that it will be so, brothers and sisters.